has always been supportive. Doctor, we thank you again for joining us today. We have our panelists also here with us, one of us as well, and my own regulator within the space where I play. Mrs. Hafsat Rufai, ACIS. Mrs. Rufai is a director and she's the head of Lagos Zonal Office of the Securities and Exchange Commission, SEC. Thank you, madam, for always heeding to the call of duty when ICSAN calls. We appreciate you. To the chairman of the Governance Practitioners Committee of the Institute, Mrs. Linda Onefeli, FCIS, I say thank you very much to you and your team for putting this together. And I also like to acknowledge all the members of the Corporate Governance Committee here present, their fellow chartered secretaries and administrators, and other distinguished participants who have joined us for today's educational and knowledge-enhancing webinar. I acknowledge you. Members of the Fourth Estate of the Realm, we have media partners also on the webinar with us today. I thank you for always making yourselves available as well as we continue to propagate the gospel of good governance across board. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, today, the 20th of June, 2024, it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to this Governance Practitioners webinar. This webinar is a continuation of the Institute's tradition of providing top-notch, continuous education for our members, other governance professionals, as well as knowledge-seeking members of the public. We have, over the years, not only continuously churned out thoroughly baked governance professionals, but we have also continually nurtured them with cutting-edge knowledge through diverse capacity-building programs and engagements. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, as it is expected from a leading voice on corporate governance that we are, I can assert confidently that there is hardly any topic or theme in governance that has not been a subject matter of intense exposition by ICSAN, both in the area of traditional core governance and as well as emerging areas of knowledge. The theme for today's webinar, Sustainable Corporate Governance Practice, Imperatives for Practitioners, examines the core issue of another important corporate governance theme. Sustainability has been defined variously. One of the most succinct being meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. That's quite profound. Sustainability is something that we just must continue to discuss, until everyone catches the importance of the issue of sustainability. Gone are those days when the sole preoccupation of business concerns is all about profit making. Today, the trend is increasingly becoming an acceptable philosophy that company directors have an obligation to serve not only the interest of shareholders, but also the interests of a broader spectrum of stakeholders, which include the community and society in which they do business. This translates to a holistic approach to operating businesses such that long-term goals and long-term targets on environmental, social, and economy are met. What then are the imperatives of governance professionals, which is the major anchor of the webinar and the discussion for today? It is imperative for leaders of corporate entities to think sustainably, as the long-term survival of businesses likely depends on this. Of course, all of us who run businesses, are involved in one business or the other, have our eyes on sustainability, and that is key and very material for the long-term survival of the business. Hence, it is imperative for corporate organizations to envision sustainable governance practices right from the policy design even to policy implementation, because sustainable governance practice essentially involves formulating strategies, systems, and policies that would have sustainability ideals in focus. This places additional perspectives on governance professionals like us in the governance field, in your capacity, in our capacity, as both governance advisors and governance executors. There is no gainsaying the fact that proactive compliance and promotion of sustainable practice, both in word and in deed, by governance professionals is paramount to achieve all-round corporate objectives within the all-important three perspectives of economic, social, and governance. That is ESG. Thus, as governance professionals, we must be aware that our duties include the coordination of activities of the board of directors towards conceiving and implementing sustainable governance practices in order to procure profitability and also enhance socio-economic growth and development for our nation. I trust that our resource persons have a lot of perspectives to share with us today on this theme, and I will now step aside and stop here with my brief highlighting on the subject. I will urge us to use the time allotted for questions, comments, and observations judiciously when we get to that time. Make clarifications around any gray areas and illumination where it might be necessary. As I round off this welcome address, I would like to express my profound appreciation on behalf of Council to the Governance Practitioners Committee of the Institute, ably led by Mrs. Linda Onefeli, FCIS, for organizing this webinar.
Thank you, Madam President. Hello. Thank you, Madam President, for your welcome address. I want
to... Am I back? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I was just rounding off before I had a little itch.
Okay.
You know, technology will always be technology. So I was appreciating you and your team, Registrar, for the seamless coordination as we've been having these webinars back to back. Well done. And I urge our members to continue to look out for more exciting knowledge enhancing programs like this, as we'll be having these programs back to back in the coming days, weeks, and months. Once again, distinguished governance practitioners, I welcome you very warmly to this capacity building ICSAN 2024 Governance Practitioners webinar, and I wish us successful deliberations. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Over to you, CEO.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President, for your welcome address. I want to invite the chairman of the committee, Governance Practitioners Committee, Mrs. Linda Onefeli. She will talk to us briefly about the committee, and also she will introduce the moderator of this program. Thank you. Mrs. Linda Onefeli, FCIS, over to you.
President, Mr. Fumi Akindele, and acknowledge all esteemed members of the faculty here.
Mr. Onefeli, you are not audible.
Am I being heard now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Thank you. I'll stand on the protocols established by our esteemed President, Mrs. Fumi Akindele, FCIS. Welcome everyone to our meeting, webinar today. Our President has given us an overview of what the program is about, and I would want to say that this program is very contemporary. The topic of this program is very contemporary, and it is a topic that it's of interest to practitioners, governance practitioners, business owners, and a program that we would all be interested and will benefit from. I also want to point out that we have lined up a faculty that is experienced, practical experience, and who will deliver to us today what we require. The theme, the corporate governance and sustainability are two themes that are intertwined. They go hand in hand, and we're looking forward to having a very productive and enlightening time. I would want to thank the our president, for the opportunity the committee, the Governance Practitioners Committee, to put this webinar together, and our faculty, Dr. Noli Edozien, Dr. Anyahara, Mrs. Rufai. I'll say thank you all. And then to our moderator, I also want to thank you. I'll use this opportunity now to introduce our moderator as we kickstart going to the sessions. I would introduce our moderator. Our moderator is one of us, is Mr. Akim Moladun, FCIS. He's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, and he's going to take us through the program. Mr. Akim Moladun, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, my chairman, Mrs. Onofeli. We go straight to the business. I would like to go through the profile of Dr. Ndidi Noli Edozien. He's our guest speaker today. He's a member of IFRS Foundation's International Sustainability Standards Board. In 1999, Dr. Ndidi founded the Growing Business Foundation, and in 2019, the Circular Economy Innovation Partnership. She was the pioneer chief sustainability and governance officer at the Dangote Group from 2017 till 2020, where she initiated and operationalized sustainability at Africa's largest business, for which she was recognized as the 2020 Sustainability Executive of the Year by CIMEX Africa. Immediately prior, she served as the faculty responsible for sustainability, ethics, and social entrepreneurship at Lagos Business School, Pan-African University. She is the co-founder of the Toronet Association Geneva, which is the blockchain and stablecoin solution to enable financial and digital inclusion. She's a co-chair research group, Finance and Economics, based on which she commenced development of her 7 pillars methodology 15 years ago. She became Associate Fellow of the University of Edinburgh in 2019, and also a member of the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI, Stakeholder Council, and the Nigeria Integrated Reporting Committee. She served as founding co-chair of the Private Sector Advisory Group on SDGs linked to the Global PSAGUN, DG, found and inaugurated by the Nigerian presidency in 2017. She holds a BSc Economics, International Relations from London University of Economics and Political Science, LSE, and a PhD in Sustainability and Governance, Johannes Wolfgang Goethe University, Frankfurt. She's an alumnus of Wharton Business School and has attended executive programs of INSEAD and George Business School, Cambridge. She has published books, several on several non-profit and social enterprise boards, and has made it her life mission to support Africa sustainable development. Join me to welcome Dr. Ndidi Noli Edozen as she do justice to this topic that we are about to deliberate upon. Dr. Ndidi, you are welcome, please.
Thank you so much. I think you can hear me, but I can't put on my video. It needs to be enabled. Thank you very much, Mr. Kimoladu, for that kind presentation. And thank you, Mrs. Ekundayo, as well, for your welcoming remarks. I appreciate it. Linda Onefeli has been coordinating. And of course, I must also thank Uto, who was the person who took me out, or I took her out, whichever it is. And at the end of a lovely breakfast, told me I must do this. So we've been juggling everything to make sure that this happens. And indeed, it's a great honor to be here. I think that ICSAN does incredible work, and its members play a very critical role also in terms of, sorry, I couldn't get your backdrop up. So I hope this works. I can put the ISSB backdrop up if that helps in terms of representation. You play a very important role on the whole sustainability journey, and this is what I'm going to try and speak to today. I also can't share slides, which I think would probably be useful. So if it's okay with you, if you allow me,
you can share. You are cool. You can share more.
Okay, so it's allowing me now. You're right. Absolutely right. So let me just find the right slides, which are suddenly not visible. Let me just make sure that those slides are visible. 1 second. So what I'd like to speak about today while I'm trying to engineer this, allow me to multitask, is, so first of all, I'm very glad that Dr. Anyahara was able to join today. We spoke yesterday and he kindly agreed to amend his program to join us today. And why is that important? That's important because, you know, the ISSB standards I'm going to speak about are not just, it's not just about the standards in theory, it's about the standards in practice. Let's see what will actually show. So can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Is it a full screen? Because I can't see myself anymore. So I cannot see myself, but I can see what I think is the screen. Does that work for you?
Yes, we are seeing the screen too.
Oh, brilliant.
On the screen.
Okay. So what I would like to speak to, let me just have a 044814. What I would like to speak to today is just to walk you through, if that's of interest, just to walk you through the ISSB and why that's important.
Recording in progress.
Hold on. I think that's my bad. Okay. I think that's better now. Apologies for the hitches. And the last thing I need to do is I need to project this on full, if I can, so that you can see the full, screen. Can you see the full screen? Can you see the full screen? I don't know if you can.
No.
not the full screen.
Okay, I can't seem to make that work, but can you see enough
it's
to make it
Yes, we can
comfortable?
see it. I think we can make do with this, so we can progress.
Awesome, brilliant. Okay, so what I'd really like to speak to today is, and are the slides moving? That's the next big question. Because on my side, they're moving, but I'm not sure that they're moving on your side.
We still have the first slide, so perhaps you should try and go to the second slide and we see how that works.
Yes, I did do.
Okay, so it's not moving on our side.
It's not moving on your side. That's what I thought. Because it's not quite behaving the way that I think it should. So let's do that again.
Okay, now it's moved. Yeah, it's moved. We're on the
Moved
second.
now.
Yeah.
You're on
So
the
whatever
second-
you did, I'm sure worked. Yeah,
Okay.
it's fine.
Okay, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, and it's moving. Is it moving?
Try and move it again now. Yes, it's moving now perfectly.
Yeah, it's only moving if I do this. So let's do it this way then. This will work. This is okay. I can see it. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about today, just to make it quick. So thank you, Dr. Aniara, for joining us. And what I was saying is that it's not just about the standards, actually. It's also about how we implement the standards at home. And my understanding of why we're doing this is that you want to look at this from a governance lens. And if I can just ask, is there any way of polling in the room to know how many people have actually learned about the ISSB standards, to how many people this is familiar, because that will determine in how much depth I go or not. So any way of checking in the room at all, getting feedback from the room, just a show of hands, or is it at all possible?
Yes, we can do show of hand. Okay, show of hand is already ongoing, and I'll put up poll.
Okay, so how many people are familiar with the ISSB standards and have worked with them before? And to how many people is this new? And is it right to presume that everyone in the room is a company secretary, governance lead, board director? So all are engaged with governance.
That's correct.
Awesome. And so, and I heard it said by the president that, you know, tone at the top in terms of leadership and sustainability is absolutely key. And so it's for this reason, I'm not going to say what you already are experts on, namely governance. What I will speak on more is, in my view, what is the most important thing for boards to own and really lead on in this time, in this climb, not just at a national level or a Pan-African level, but really globally, because this is real and it is happening, and it could fundamentally change the way that organizations are run. It will actually, and the way that capital will flow going forward. And that's what I wanted to speak about and kind of give you a sense of why that is important. I'm really sorry that this isn't you know, projecting fully as don't need these, we don't need the notes. I don't know why it's not projecting as a full screen at the moment, but we'll just work with what we have. And it's not doing that either, so really nothing we can do. Okay, so we carry on.
Ma, can we have the slide so we can assist the chef from here?
I think
Oh, it's
we've
perfectly
done.
I think we have the full. Yes.
Yes, I think we've finally got it.
Perfect.
Awesome. All right then. It's so funny because when you get so used to using one system, and I'm so used to Teams now, you forget everything about Zoom, which is what's just becoming clear to me. So the International Sustainability Standards Board, which I'm a member of, sits alongside the International Accounting Standards Board, which the accountants in the room will be familiar with. And what's happened now by putting this Sustainability Standards Board next to the Accounting Standards Board, what it's done is it's really brought sustainability into the mainstream of financial reporting, and therefore also into the mainstream of business strategy, and therefore into the core of the boardroom. And what I've projected here is really the governance structure of the IFRS Foundation itself, so that you know that it has a monitoring board, which includes members like IOSCO. And IOSCO oversees all the capital markets authorities in the world. And really, the ISSB is written as sustainability standards geared towards serving investors' information needs. As you know, investors allocate the capital. And so one of the biggest risks and opportunities that we are facing in the world today is sustainability related. That is climate, but not just climate, also biodiversity, human capital, and so much more. And this is what the IFRS Foundation is set out to address. Why is the foundation doing this? Again, I speak to history in Nigeria, because in 2021, before the ISSB was born, the IFRS Foundation put out an ask to say, should we, in addition to accounting standards, which by the way, are adopted by almost every African country, and including and especially Nigeria, which is a leader in this regard, should we, in addition to accounting standards, also oversee and write sustainability standards? And the overriding response was yes. I remember sitting in a room with the current ICANN president and also Dr. Anyahara, who was representing the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. I was the Chief Sustainability and Governance Officer at Dangote Group at the time, responsible for sustainability and governance for all of the group's entities. And the stock exchange had just issued sustainability guidelines, which we were determined to comply with ahead of time. And in fact, we did, as Dangote was the first entity to publish its compliant sustainability report and put that up at the stock exchange at the facts behind the sustainability report, the maiden edition of it. It was very important to set the ball rolling. And at that time, we responded as a group. Innocent was not yet the president of ICANN at the time, and we said, yes, the IFRS Foundation should issue sustainability standards and oversee sustainability as well. The reason why I tell this story so elaborately is because you never know how what you do today can influence where you are and who you are tomorrow, and can in fact influence the way the world is. And I tell this story also because it underscores the fact that Nigeria has helped to shape the ISSB standards from the very beginning, because if it was in fact the Nigerian Minister of Finance who then, in about 1 year later, after the ISSB was formed in September 2022, it was the Nigerian Minister of Finance who weighed in, together with others, at the African Finance Ministers Forum for the first really communique statement to be issued that Africa will adopt these standards, and asking the ISSB to commit capacity building support, and also urging that the standards should be used to help unlock capital flows. And that indeed is the reason why Africa has remained in the forefront. Nigeria was the first country globally to indicate that it was going to adopt these standards. It was the first country in Africa to launch its roadmap, which happened just in March 2023, after an extensive consultation that was launched in February 2023. Nigeria was the country that inspired the ISSB chair to make that Africa visit that he made with me in March. We went to South Africa, Kenya, and Nigeria. And in fact, of the 7 countries in the world where the ISSB standards were launched, Nigeria was one of them. South Africa was another, but 2 African countries of 7 global countries were where these standards were launched. And the reason for these standards was because G20, G7, IOSCO, the Financial Stability Board, all asked for decision useful comparable information to create a more efficient reporting landscape and end the alphabet soup of voluntary initiatives on sustainability reporting. So now I can go back to you and ask you how many people in the room actually raised their hand to say they had heard of the ISSB standards, because that will determine what I emphasize and what I don't. Do you have a response on that?
Yes, earlier, about 7 students.
7.
Yes.
Okay, so that's 7 out of 157. So most people have not heard of the standards before. Okay, so so maybe what I'll do is I'll focus a little bit more on the earlier section, because my understanding is I'm presenting until 1, which gives me about 19 minutes. What I will do is I'll make the slides available. They're quite easy to understand, and I will come back again, of course. And Dr. Anyahara is also going to go into a little bit more detail based on the roadmap, actually, that was published in Nigeria. But just very quickly, the ISSB standards are built to be decision useful and to be cost effective. Cost effective for preparers because instead of having a whole range of standards to look at for sustainability, you have a global baseline that is interoperable. So interoperability is a big word, is interoperable with other standards like GRI, which you may have heard about, or TCFD, which are the 4 pillars that start with governance, strategy, risks and opportunities, and metrics and targets. The whole TCFD framework, the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, that was launched by the Financial Stability Board, has been handed over to the ISSB to oversee and govern going forward. And in fact, the TCFD framework, which has governance at the top, has been built into both S1 and S2, which are the first 2 standards of the IFRS Foundation. Likewise, integrated reporting has been built into the organization's structure and has been baked into S1 and S2. And so it is decision useful because it's geared towards investors. And it is cost effective because it's proportionate to make it easy to access. And to give you another example of that, the SASB standards, which are 77 industry metrics, were also handed over to the ISSB and the IFRS Foundation. And they make it easier to identify what are investors looking for. So investors give you capital when they feel that you are managing your risks effectively and you're taking advantage of your opportunities that arise. For example, climate may be a risk in one instance, but it may also be an opportunity with the coming of new technologies where you can reduce, for example, the cost of power by using renewable energy. So the same thing that's a risk becomes an opportunity. And it really requires the board to take ownership of the sustainability journey and the board to determine that it is going to mainstream sustainability thinking and sustainability action within an organization. So you cannot underscore how important TCFD and governance at the top means. And this is the reason why, we were so pleased when TCFD, once we had launched our standards, shortly afterwards said, well, we're going to consolidate everything into the IFRS Foundation. The work with GRI also to make sure that we are able to build on those who are reporting according to GRI. We've worked very hard on interoperability in that regard to make sure that the work that you've done to date is not wasted, but rather is a very value-adding piece of the larger puzzle. And the reason why the ISSB standards are so important is because they help to build that connectivity into your financial statements so that it is actually your financial statements that you pick up to identify and see and understand your sustainability related risks and opportunities, and how they will influence the prospects of your business going forward. So this is what I've been trying to explain, the building block approach of the truly global baseline that we call the ISSB standards that serve investor needs across global capital markets. And what's very important there is that it's a common language. It's so that we can all speak the same language across the world. This is an overview of the standards that have already been built into the IFRS Foundation. And what you need to add to that is that the European standards and the GRI, the Global Reporting Initiative, are interoperable with the ISSB standards. So, you know, they just work very, very closely with one another. For example, on climate-related disclosures, where it's been estimated that the overlap is 80 to 90%. And that's partly because they both work on the greenhouse gas protocol, and also because there have been deliberate interactions to make sure that terminology, language, definitions, and what they're pointing to in terms of the source material is similar. And all of this, like I said, is towards reducing the alphabet soup and reducing the cost and burden of reporting. And just to emphasize on that and give it a physical and visual look, TCFD and SASB and integrated reporting has become part of this. Connectivity is really important in terms of underpinning why corporate governance is so important. If you know integrated reporting, then you know Professor Mervyn King of the King Code, who is very central to this. I think with one of, and I won't mention which entity, but one of the entities that I worked with very, very closely before I joined the ISSB, one of the things that we did was really bring Professor King into the boardroom to have a conversation around how integrated reporting feeds into the ISSB standards and how core and fundamental it is that governance, the highest level of governance, owns sustainability reporting and takes ownership of what emerges from this. So that's the integrated reporting framework that's been consolidated. This is the 77 industry disclosure standards that I spoke about that have also been embedded into the standards so that you can pick up your specific industry and understand, you know, what is absolutely essential to investors in terms of your own approach. And then, of course, there is the CDSB material that we've also absorbed into the foundation. I've spoken to you already about the fact that the disclosures, or maybe I haven't yet. So not just is it that we create the global baseline and we issue the standards, but there's a very important role that the national regulators play. And this is something that the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria has been leading on. Just yesterday, I was in conversations with Zambia, and the day before that with Uganda. And it's really interesting because they're all pointing to Nigeria and to Nigeria's roadmap as the best practice example that they're using. So Nigeria is really emerging as a best practice example and a leader in this field because of the work of the regulator. And we started with the regulator being Dr. Ahmed, Ambassador Ahmed, and then we now have Dr. Rabiu Olowo, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the regulatory body. Dr. Anyara, of course, was in both of these FRCN leadership teams. And there's been consistency. In fact, there's been an enhancement every step of the way from even before the ISSB standards were launched and even before Ambassador Ahmed was appointed, when we were advocating for sustainability being part of what the IFRS Foundation does. So Nigeria has been consistent. There have been no policy flip-flops. It has been continuous in its commitment and its dedication and its advocacy. And right now, what it speaks to very strongly is that capacity building is absolutely essential to the way forward. I love this diagram because it provides a pictorial view of the vision of what it is we're building. So what we know so far is the IFRS accounting standards. And the FRCN also played a very critical role in terms of capacity building for the adoption of these accounting standards in Nigeria. And in fact was born in association with the birth of these accounting standards. And now it's playing a critical role in terms of the integration of sustainability related financial disclosures, because the intention of the ISSB is for the sustainability related financial disclosures, that is the risks and opportunities and everything that is associated therewith in terms of disclosures on the 4 pillars of governance, strategy, risks and opportunities, targets and metrics, to be disclosed at the same time as the financial statements, no longer as a pretty glossy sustainability report, but at the same time as the financial statements. But that does not mean that you cannot continue with multi-stakeholder sustainability reporting as you've always done. And that's the reason why we're working so hard on interoperability with GRI standards and other jurisdictional requirements. But what I wanted to say with this also is that it's very important to understand that, like with the roadmap, every jurisdiction chooses how it implements the ISSB standards. And the FRCN has been very specific and very consultative in building an adoption readiness working group and making sure that various stakeholders are involved in shaping how these standards are set up. I see a number of hands up. I don't know whether those are questions or whether they're still the hand raised of who was familiar with the standards. Should I just pause?
Was the initial hands.
It was the initial hands, okay. Legacy hands, as we call them. So in terms of the architecture, I've talked about this. Again, this diagram is also very important for me because it's a visual of the role that governance plays. And because we're governance practitioners in the room, I highlighted governance because it frames everything. And governance and the board really takes ownership of strategy. And in this instance, what we really need to do is we need to rethink strategy. And what the ISSB standards offer is an opportunity actually to take the ISSB standards, IFRS S1 and IFRS S2, and build them into the core strategy of the organization in order to improve risk management and ensure that the metrics and targets that we're measuring the organization's performance against are good for the short term, medium term, and long term, and take into cognizance sustainability related, climate related risks and opportunities that are so real in our world today. What's very important there on the other side is we have the general requirement standard, which you see in dark gray. That's IFRS S1. And then we also have the cross-industry requirements, which are the SASB standards, or for example, the climate-related standard, which is thematic, and it speaks to climate specifically, but then it also has the industry-based requirements, which speak to different industries in accordance with what those requirements are, because those targets and the metrics change and the risks change according to industry. So it's very interesting to look at risks and opportunities and targets and metrics from an industry lens and influence one's strategy based on those risks and opportunities in order to build economic resilience for that business in the context in which it operates. And of course, what's very, very important to the ISSB standards is a view of the value chain. So it's not just the organization itself, but also the value chain and the supply chain that actually feed the organization. So you really end up with a very holistic perspective of what your business looks like and what sustainability related risks it might be facing now and in the future. So that really is a mindset shift that I think is of great advantage to Nigeria, and the first 2 standards that were proposed and then were actually launched. And this is one thing that I think is so fascinating about the ISSB. It set targets and it set timelines, which were about 5 times or sometimes even 10 times the speed of which the IFRS Foundation was used to, or the accounting standards world was used to. And it has met all of those timelines. And sometimes people ask me, so why are you in such a hurry? And the reason why is because if we didn't launch these, for example, the climate-related standard on time, as we proposed to, if we hadn't put the exposure draft out there and given enough time for feedback to come back in to help us shape those standards, then what would have happened is that Europe would have launched their standards, and we would have had a jurisdictional standard or a regional standard that was very strong and influential in the world that no one, for example, on the African continent, had a chance to give input on. Whereas with the ISSB standards, which is positioned to be the truly global baseline, Africa did have a chance to shape through these exposure drafts that were put out for comment. They had a chance to shape what these standards look like. And that's how we ended up with IFRS S1 and IFRS S2, which are the two standards that I wanted to jump into detail on. I'm looking at the time, and it's 4 minutes to 1. I know Dr. Anyahara was due to speak at 1, and I want to be faithful to keeping that 1 o'clock timeline. So in 4 minutes, I'm just going to run through what these remaining slides are about, because I think the most important piece was to provide a framing of what this is about before getting too technical. And like I did, I assured you that I will come back and I will make another presentation if that is of interest to you. So really the following slides are to give an overview of what is in IFRS S1, what is in IFRS S2, which is focused on climate. So the first is focused on general, and the other is focused specifically on climate. And it's an overview again about what the ISSB standards can deliver. It then speaks to the future priorities. You know, what are the 4-pillar strategy to support implementation and strategy? Because that's the next big step. And in fact, it might be better to go through this when you have actually had a chance to look at your standards, at the roadmap in Nigeria, at your own organization and your own adoption readiness, before we actually do a deep dive into the standards and what implementation means. Maybe you need to go and look at the requirements and what the FRCN has said about adoption for your specific company and industry. What I also speak a little bit to is that how much support is out there. So we have a knowledge hub. This morning, my first presentation was with the United Nations Sustainable Stock Exchange. I did the opening remarks to a capacity building session that is also publicly available. But the IFRS Foundation itself has a knowledge hub where there are a lot of videos, there's a lot of knowledge on there. It also has a transition implementation group where we have both Dangote and MTN representatives also meeting on a quarterly basis to shape what the standards, what the feedback is on the implementation of the standards. And of course, there's capacity building, which we'll be working with a lot of Nigerian providers on. There's the interoperability guidance, which provides practical input and support of how the European standards align with the ISSB standards that was just published in May. The priorities of what we're going to be doing going forward, namely a focus on biodiversity ecosystems and ecosystem services and human capital. These are the next 2 standards that we're working on. So what we're doing at the moment is horizon scanning and getting a detailed understanding and really listening to the market as well in terms of how this research should be focused. So really, it's also very interesting and important to get your input on what does human capital or biodiversity ecosystem services and ecosystems look like from a Nigerian lens. And we're now 1 minute to 1 o'clock. I wanted to keep to time. Like I said, I can do a deep dive on IFRS S1 and S2, but more important, I believe, is for you to speak and listen to the regulator in Nigeria who is really leading this initiative from a Nigerian perspective and is on the call today presenting from 1 o'clock. because I unfortunately had a clash in schedules. And I just want to thank you for the privilege of sharing with you. I want to thank you for your time and for listening. I want to thank Nigeria for its leadership. I'm so proud to be Nigerian. I think that you can also be proud that it is Nigeria that is represented on the ISSB board, not any other African country. It is Nigeria. And Nigeria actually also speaks for the Global South, because there is no representative right now from the Middle East or from Latin America. And so we do have to stand up and rise up. And so every time I see, and Nigeria comes up all the time as a best practice example, every time Nigeria is mentioned, I am extremely proud of the way that we have engaged and the way that we are leading. And I am most excited about the fact that these standards are designed to unlock capital flows. So when, again, the African Development Bank is led by a Nigerian, the Secretary General also, and when we signed an MOU or signed a letter of intent to work together, also in May, so just last month, what I said was, well, it's just by coincidence that there are so many Nigerians in the room, again, influencing things. But the point is, they are Nigerians acting for Africa and as Africans. And the intention of the International Sustainability Standards Board's standards, or the IFRS Foundation's sustainability standards, is to work alongside the accounting standards to create more holistic financial statements, so that there is decision useful information that can be used by investors to unlock capital flows. And that is only going to happen if companies embrace these standards for themselves as larger listed entities, parts of the global capital markets, but also for the smaller entities, the supply chains and the value chains, because we must carry these smaller entities along, even the informal sector, which is the space that I have perhaps the most experience with, working with large companies to make sure that they are carrying along smaller entities. This is the work of the Growing Businesses Foundation, which I often call my third child. I know that it can work because I've seen it work and add value for the smallest of entrepreneurs and the biggest of businesses. It's a win-win-win-win. And it's what we need for our economies to thrive. And so I do believe that it's only by companies embracing these standards, and by embracing these standards, implementing them in such a manner that you are unlocking capital flows that will help you become more economically and financially and climate resilient, and really truly build the future of Nigeria and Africa. And so this is my belief. It's the reason why I'm so passionate about this. It's not just about compliance. It's not just about reporting. It really is about a better understanding of our businesses and future shaping, making these businesses future fit. And I will land with the sentence that this just has to be owned by the board. It has to be owned and led by the highest level of governance. And that's the reason why I was so excited. And I want to thank again Uto for the kind invitation and recommendation to speak. Akinmoladun, for your kind introduction and reading of my profile, which was almost embarrassing. Mrs. Onefeli, for the kind coordination and making sure that I showed up today. And Mrs. Ekundayo, for the very, very kind and warm and inspiring introduction to today's session. And I am sure you will be overwhelmed by Dr. Anyahara's presentation going forward, and he will really bring to the ground, earth, everything that I have said thus far. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ndidi Noli-Edozen. We have really been benefited from this brilliant presentation. Let me go through the profile of Dr. Anyara. Dr. Anyara has over 3 decades of industry experience, of which more than 20 years have been in financial reporting and management, accounting standard, setting and financial reporting regulation at the Financial Reporting Council. He acted as the Executive Secretary, Chief Executive Officer of the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria during a 14-month interregnum, that is March 1, 2020 to May 18, 2021, when he was charged with the responsibility of steering the agency to maintain the steady oversight of financial reporting nationwide. Dr. Anyara is currently the coordinating director and head of directorates of accounting standards, that is public and private sectors, and sustainability reporting unit at the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria. Dr. Anyara has played several leadership roles in the local and global accounting profession due to his readiness for service. When called upon, he served as a member of Inter-Ministerial Committee on National Chart of Accounts for Nigeria, as well as member of the IPSAS Gap Analysis Committee. He was the secretary to the National Stakeholders Committee on the roadmap for the adoption of International Financial Reporting Standard, IFRS, in Nigeria. Dr. Odinaka Anyara is a member of several professional bodies, among which is a fellow of the Chartered Accountants of Nigeria. He's also a fellow Association of Forensic Accounting Researchers and Nigerian Institute of Management. He serves as a resource person to both the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria and Association of National Accountants of Nigeria. He is a member of the ICANN's Corporate Reporting Faculty. Anyara played a role as technical advisor to Christopher Young International Public Sector Accounting Standards board member during his tenure. He is presently technical advisor to Yokoba Traore International Public Sector Accounting Standards board member. He is currently the chair, Adoption Readiness Working Group, ARWG, for sustainability reporting in Nigeria. Let me mention that his incurable passion for credible financial reporting is the driving force for his commitment to a profession he regards as a sacred calling for the greater good, and in which he expresses passionate solemnity in practice. This privilege to serve in the SAC aligns with his passion for seeing accounting continue to maintain its historical roles as an instrumentality of development in society. Therefore, his interest aligns with his passion of using accounting as developmental tool, nationally and globally. He, in his career, in his accounting regulation, as more than he sees his accounting career more as a vocation. Let us welcome Dr. Ifeanyi Odinaka Anyara, PhD, FCA, to deal with this matter as we are been expecting him to deal with it. Dr. Anyara, you are welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. It appears Dr. Anyara is currently out of the call. I'm sure he's trying to join back in. And while he said he's having challenges logging back in, a bit of delay. So while we give him a minute to come back in, I'd like to make a presentation to our first speaker, Dr. Ndidi Noli Edozie. We recognize the fact that she won't be able to be on this call throughout because she has prior engagement. So we want to make this presentation to her now, and so that at the time whenever she leaves, we would have made the presentation. So we would like to present her plaque to her, thanking her for her erudite presentation. And I'm going to be calling on Mrs. Biola Lasende, a council member, to make this presentation on our behalf. IT, please, can you let Mrs. Biola Lasende make this presentation? Thank you very much.
Yeah, ma'am. She can speak.
Okay, Mrs. Lasende, please could you oblige us and make this presentation? Thank you.
Hello.
Is Mrs. Lasende? Mrs. Lasende, am I being heard?
Not on the call again, ma'am.
Okay, she's not. Can Mrs. Ronke Okpajobi, also a council member, make this presentation? Ms. Okpajobi, IT, please give her upgrade her so that she can.
Yes, she can speak from. She can speak.
Okay, Ms. Okpajobi, kindly make this presentation on our behalf. Thank you. Okay, it appears she's not up.
Mrs. Onefeli, thank you so much. I just want to thank, because I think I heard Dr. Anihara. So I want you I really deeply appreciate the presentation. I've taken, I think I tried to capture a snapshot of this. I'll post it on LinkedIn. I'll do a nice post. And I've answered the questions in the Q&A. I see that there weren't actually, okay, now I see there's a question. So I'm just going to, most of the questions are just thank you. And there's one question that says, what's the role of ISSB to corporate governance practitioners for organizations and businesses' success today? It was my hope that I had responded to that with the presentation I gave. So I don't know the role of ISSB to corporate governance practitioners. I think the role of ISSB is adopt the standards. Go pick up IFRS S1, read them, look at the roadmap that Dr. Anihara is about to present, and see and listen from that and see how that actually impacts your organization. It will impact every organization. And corporate governance practitioners are going to be at the center of making sure that the board is leading in terms of the embedding of sustainability standards within the organization. That's what my point would be. I would love to stay till the end, and I promise that next time, since we'll have a little bit more notice, we will. And I really hope you enjoy the presentation of Dr. Anihara, and I do look forward to joining you in future. There's a question as well, is there any correlation between ISSB and not-for-profit entities? Absolutely, yes. I think that, you know, I have always believed, having created a not-for-profit myself in 1999, that not-for-profit does not mean that you're not going to be trying to create surpluses, and does not mean that you shouldn't be writing sustainability reports, and also does not mean that you shouldn't actually think commercially. So some of the largest, IFRS Foundation is a not-for-profit organization, but it still has to think about sustainability, accounting, about finance. So is there a relevance to not-for-profits? Absolutely, yes. So please do embrace and engage and take a look at them. Thank you very much. I think I've answered all the questions in the chat. What's the roadmap for the adoption of sustainability reporting in Nigeria? That's the last question that just came in, and that's exactly what Dr. Anyahara is going to speak about, which is the reason why I was so keen for him to join this session. So over to you, Dr. Anyahara.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ndidi, and thanks everybody for the patience. I want to start by sincerely apologizing. It hasn't been a good timing. I had a flight change, which affected all the movement. If you can hear me, I am at the airport trying to manage, so I may not really be at my best. I would want to just give about few minutes before my flight. I sincerely apologize. Let's go straight. Dr. Ndidi is somebody I highly appreciate and would always want to partner with her to hear her speak because of the passion and the knowledge she has in this space. She has been able to take us through on sustainability. My role will be to discuss the roadmap, and I would have loved to take you a little deep into IFRS S2. In COP27, Nigeria
Sorry, sir, you
signified
can
an
move.
intention
Sorry,
to
sir,
be
you can
an
move
early
out of your device.
adopter, and it was pioneered by the then Executive Secretary of Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, Ambassador Ahmed, who stood and made sure that Nigeria's voice was heard. After the intent, we had a 3-day training, which coincided with the inauguration of the Adoption Readiness Working Group on June 6, 2023. And I want to appreciate Dr. Ndidi for facilitating those 3 wonderful days that I would say was the baptism of sustainability training in Nigeria. We took that on June 26. Nigeria was selected as one of the very few 5 countries that simultaneously launched the IFRS S1, S2. Since that, we have not relented. We have worked assiduously to ensure that the roadmap was completed. From that June 6 to March 22nd, we had about 8 months that we worked collaboratively as stakeholders, including the Harvard Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. We looked at all the issues relating to how to effectively and seamlessly adopt sustainability reporting in Nigeria. We looked at some critical areas, and the areas we had the timelines for reporting. We looked at the demands and what it takes to have effective and seamless reporting in Nigeria. And we agreed to have 4 stages or 4 phases. Phase 1 is what we call the early adopters, which meant for those who could report sustainability using IFRS S1, S2.
I think Dr. Anyaora is off the call. I believe he's going to join in another minute. Thank you.
I should announce now that we make the presentation to Dr. now.
Madam Chair, am I audible?
Yes, you are.
In view of Dr. Anyaora's constraints, he had informed the meeting that I was at the airport and waiting for his flight. Perhaps we could just jump into the next item on the agenda because it's fully out of the meeting right now. So perhaps he's still struggling with the conflict in timing.
But before then, the registrar wants to recognize some people.
Okay, fantastic. We could go ahead and do that, and then we'll continue with the program. Thank you.
Mr. Registrar.
Okay, thank you. While the presentation by Dr. Noli Edo, while the presentation was going on, some council members joined, and I want to recognize them, not in a particular order. Our amiable Vice President, Mrs. Uto Okwana, FCIS, Mr. Tony Okoma, FCIS, Mrs. Abiola Lesende, FCIS, Mr. Andy Amos, FCIS, Mrs. Benedicta Shadari, FCIS, our past president, Mr. Bode Ayeku, FCIS, Mr. Dele Togunde, FCIS, Mrs. Jacqueline Odiadi, FCIS, Mrs. Nkechi Onyeso, FCIS, Ms. Ronke Okpajobi, FCIS. We also have the chairman of Akwa Ibom chapter, Chinoyerem Ini Emembong, and the immediate past chairman of Lagos chapter, Mr. Femi Shokon, FCIS. Thank you for joining. Mr. Moderator, over to you.
Thank you, Registrar. I think, Moderator, you can continue.
So let me present the profile of Mrs. Afsat Olubukola Rufai. Mrs. Rufai has over 20 years of proven and veritable track record of contributing to the development of the financial services sector in Nigeria. She has served in many committees, boards, councils, and delivered capacity building lectures to shape policy, thrust, and innovation in the financial sector both in Nigeria and overseas. She was a member of the committees that developed the capital market master plans in Nigeria. She's a director and the highest ranking female in the Security and Exchange Commission, the apex regulatory body of the capital market in Nigeria. Hafsat is an accomplished professional, having climbed the ladder to the highest point of her career and profession. She holds many professional and academic qualifications. She's a fellow of the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria, ICAN. She's a member of the Chartered Institute of Security and Investment, UK. She's an associate of Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers, associate of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. Of course, she's a member of the committee that is organizing this program. She holds a global certificate of regulators of securities market from the prestigious Harvard Law School, International Organization of Security Commission, IOSCO, and Program on International Financial System. She's also an associate of Toronto Center, having completed the leadership program for women, supervisors, and regulators. Hafsat graduated top on her class and holds a magna cum laude degree in business administration from American International University, the Gambia, and a higher national diploma in accounting from the Federal Polytechnic Ilaro, Nigeria. She was also the best in ethics, law, and regulation of security and corporate finance in the Chartered Institute of Stockbrokers examination in 2019. She's a proven visionary, planner, strategist, director, manager, leader, team player, and a teacher. Join me to welcome Mrs. Hafsat Olubukanla Rufai, ACIS, to present her brilliant this topic to us just now. Mrs. Rufai, you are welcome.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kimolado, and good afternoon, the President, Council members, speakers at this occasion, and participants. Mr. Akinmolado said I should present my paper. I will try to speak to the topic. I'm not expected to present a paper per se. I'm only supposed to discuss one or two things. But I must say that I appreciate the presentation made earlier by Dr. Ndidi. She has set the tone correctly, and of course, aptly, as one expected. I didn't expect less. I'll touch on a few things that she mentioned, and I'll also add from the SCC's perspective. So Dr. Ndidi had told us about how the standards were established by the ISSB, that's the International Sustainability Standards Board, which was established by the IFRS Foundation, and then it sits side by side the International Accounting Standards Board, the IASB, that makes the various IFRSs we use in financial reporting. And so the partnership, I would say, between them has enabled what we typically refer to now as corporate reporting, because time was when financial reports were basically on financial position standards, cash flow, reports of directors, and the rest of them. But right now, there's a lot more that we have in the financial reports, and the sustainability reports, of course, are now expected to, going forward, based on the roadmap, which Dr. Ayahara was to talk about, also be incorporated in financial statements. So we have, going forward, or better still, we now have integrated reporting, which is more holistic and more useful to investors. In other words, investors are able to tell from the financial perspective the performance of a company. They're also able to see the financial implications of adoption of sustainability. And I must also share the passion of Dr. Ndidi, and as well the passion of a number of us, which is that even without being pushed, sustainability is about you benefiting from the world today without compromising the ability of future generations to also benefit from the same world. And so standards are meant to enhance what we should be doing. But I would also like to say that we should imbibe it as a culture. So yes, the standards are there. Regulators are trying to make sure that they are well adopted and implemented. But as a people, we also need to think about how we adopt these practices to enhance the world that we live in. So while we are trying to make money for our various companies and businesses, we're also thinking of how to make the environment better, how to relate better, how to enhance gender participation in what we do, how to ensure that there's balance in everything that we do, how to also enhance the environment. So it is about ESG essentially, with a focus on sustainability in terms of protecting the environment, improving the economy, and of course, improving our social relationship while still, of course, making money. So it is not a trade-off, it is a balance between what we would like to achieve financially and how we enhance the world that we live in. So Dr. Ndidi also mentioned that Nigeria was the country that indicated adoption, or was the first country to indicate globally the adoption of the standards, the S1 and S2, I believe. And then she also mentioned that we were the first country to also churn out our roadmap. And that shows that there's a commitment to doing things right in Nigeria. So I remember the Paris Agreement and the various commitments under the Paris Agreement, for instance, which has to do with climate, and then the concessions given to developing countries, including a net zero implication on the net zero carbon emission and the commitments that we have made. And then these standards even go beyond just climate. They also are very, very encompassing. Now, she said the standards were launched in 7 countries, and Nigeria and South Africa are 2 African countries in which the standards were launched. She also mentioned the interoperability of the standards, which of course buttresses the fact that we had talked about integrated reporting. So it is not a trade-off. It is not about adopting sustainability and then stopping setting other reports. It's about how this integrates into all the other existing standards or reports that we have and how it makes it better. So interoperability means the ability to be able to share or to be able to connect with other existing systems and still enhance what the end result will be. Now, part of what I took from what Dr. Ndidi talked about is the investor focus that this seems to have. So she showed us a diagram which had at the base the financial reporting, which of course we all know is an investor focused report. She also showed the next layer, which is the sustainability reports, which is investor focus, and then sustainability related financial disclosures, I beg your pardon, and the financial and the sustainability reporting itself, which is a multi-stakeholder focus. In other words, it is all encompassing, it leaves no one out. We've got the investor focus because it's important to be, what's the word? So to be focused, on increasing or improving the wealth of those who own the companies. And of course, to also be responsible enough to be able to meet our obligations to creditors and other stakeholders. But more importantly, the reports are not just for investors. So yes, there's an investor focus, but we also have that multi-stakeholder view. In other words, all other interested parties, the community that we serve, the government, the media, just all, even students, researchers, and so on, will have their take from the reports that we will be churning out as sustainability reporters, I would like to say. And then she also, just like I said, she emphasized the enterprise value. It is not just about, there's that misconception that when you become a sustainable organization, you may be short of the projected profits or the usual profits that you have been making. And we're beginning to see that that is not so. Indeed, there are investors who are now impact investors who are focused on investing only in entities that are ESG compliant, who are, so people who want to make money and are conscious of protection of the world for future generations. So there are people who are becoming deliberate in investing in such entities, and so it is not true that there's going to be a trade-off of your profit when you become sustainable. We agree that, to some extent, yes, from an investor perspective, there might be that period where there is still a slow growth. There is that period where profitability may not be as high. As it is with most new ventures anyway. And so we know that investors who have a long-term perspective to invest in realize that the first few years are years where you have to be patient investors, where the organization needs to probably re-strategize from a non-ESG compliant organization to one that is more compliant, and then begin to balance out this new arrangement and begin to churn out better profits in future. And so it is not exactly a trade-off, and the enterprise value is still well protected. She emphasized that part of the enterprise value is the focus on governance, which is made up of strategy, risk management, the various other metrics and targets. Targets would be profit targets, would be climate change targets. It could be various environmental impact targets. Whatever targets that the board sets. And then one other important thing she said is that the journey to sustainability has to be driven by the board. So it has to be owned by the board. Only the board can make this happen. So in their decision making, in the target setting, in their various strategies, they have to be sustainability focused to make things happen. Indeed, the tone from the top really does matter a lot in all that we do as a people and as, of course, organizations that we all represent at this forum. So I think those are some of the things that Dr. Ndidi talked about. So I will say that from the SEC perspective, we recognize that sustainability and corporate governance are not just regulatory requirements, but they are imperatives that shape long-term success and resilience of big businesses. And I touched on that quite a bit. So we cannot have a world where people are just profit-focused without thinking of how to protect the environment, how to better the environment. I also like the analogy that Dr. Ndidi drew, which is that there are two sides to a coin. So while you think that climate is about managing risks of, it's also one, the flip side of it is that you can actually become profitable when you're climate focused. So, you can be one that generates profits from renewable energy. You can also save costs. So as it is now, electricity has become a more expensive overhead for us in various organizations. And so those who have decided or who have adopted alternative energy sources, solar and so on, are beginning to see that there's cost savings from that. So even if the intention was not to be ESG compliant or sustainability compliant, I think the turnout of events have made some of us refocus on what is right. And so it is not just about just obeying or complying with standards, is also about profitability in some sense. So whether you're going into renewable energy or you are simply just adopting a cleaner energy source, it is in the interest of all of us as a people and as a country, Nigeria. So the journey to sustainability and good governance is a shared responsibility by all of us, regulators, professional bodies, market participants, and stakeholders. And so again, let me also try to add my voice to certain parent calls that we have been making. I think there's a lot of armchair sitting that we sometimes experience, with people expecting that regulators should drive everything. But the truth is that collaboration helps to get more results than waiting for somebody to always champion a cause. So yes, we may make rules, we may make standards, we may make regulations that are meant to serve as minimum standards in particular directions, but your adoption of those things or your addition to what we do would make it better for all of us. So it is a joint responsibility of everyone and not just the regulators. And in a world increasingly aware of ESG, that is environmental, social, and governance factors, the importance of integrating these elements into our corporate strategies cannot be overstated. Investors, stakeholders, and broader society are demanding more from businesses in terms of impact on the environment and their commitment to ethical practices. So sustainable corporate governance practices in companies has assumed increased significance as the legitimacy of companies' very existence is increasingly seen to depend on long-term wealth creation, accountability, maintaining social acceptance as well. Now, sustainability encompasses ESG factors that impact business performance and reputation significantly. According to the UN World Commission on Development and Environment, sustainability means meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet that. I mean, that's something I just like to talk about. It's about not being selfish. It's about not being myopic. It's about not thinking just about today. Because if we destroy the environment, we've got what would others do? So local Nigeria that I am, so the children and your generations to come, the grandchildren, the great-grand, what would we leave behind for them if we destroy what we have? So in everything that we do, we have to continue to continuously think about the future generations who are meant to take over from us. Some of them, of course, would coexist with us. So I'm trying not to deliver a lecture, but Mr. Akinmola has put me on my toes, trying to make me deliver a lecture. So I'll also say that it's such that it aims at ensuring long-term viability and success of organizations. And in the same vein, there is the opinion that good governance enhances the company's ability to meet the expectation of shareholders and increase the wealth of investors. So I said that earlier. The investors who are savvy, who have a bias for impact, will always look towards companies who are also focused on sustainability. You will see that over time, as we continue to have these engagements, as we continue to enlighten ourselves on the importance of sustainability, there would be a shift from the interest in non-compliant entities or non-compliant companies to those that are who are sustainability-focused entities, because of the need to continuously protect our environment. And I'm also not just talking about the environment, but the need for other social factors which drive businesses. Now, the Securities and Exchange Commission, as far back as 2018, in its effort to also entrench sustainability as a practice in Nigeria, approved the sustainability disclosure guidelines made by the NGX, then Nigerian Stock Exchange. So way back in 2018, we had given approval to such a standard to serve as a baseline or as a blueprint for public companies to comply with in terms of sustainability reporting. And so we expected, since 2018, have been getting disclosures from these companies. And then further to that, in 2021, the FSRCC, the Financial Services Regulation Coordination Committee, which is made up of regulators in the financial markets, the CBN, the SEC, the NICOM, PENCOM. It also has Ministry of Finance, the Corporate Affairs Commission as members, also came up with the Sustainable Finance Principles, and the SEC adopted that wholly in 2021. Again, that is supposed to also provide a guide to what companies should do and how they should report. These guideline, I must say, predates the S1 and S2, which was made by the SSB, but at least to show that that Nigeria as a country had the interest in sustainability way back, and then we didn't have to wait for the push internationally. We support, of course, what the ISSB is doing, and of course, our sister regulator, the Financial Reporting Council. But I'm only saying that we had these requirements. Reporting had become a thing in Nigeria way back since 2018, and then the government approved one beyond that which the SEC had approved was the 2021 expectation. That talks about ESG focus, like I said, like it talks about collaboration and for capacity building, because again, we are human, government officials are humans. We realize that for every new development, there needs to be time and effort put into capacity building. So people have to learn what we're talking about. And that is what ICSAN is doing today. And I commend ICSAN. I'm a member of the Governance Practitioners Committee, but that's not just it. I commend ICSAN for approving of the suggestion to have these capacity building webinar today, because we have to continuously learn. And I'm sure that many of us have learned from what Dr. Ndidi spoke about earlier. We also, in the guideline of 2021, talked about the interest in investment in priority sectors, but those particularly who have ESG considerations. So we also, in some subtle way, try to engineer or try to encourage investors to also look in the direction of those entities that are ESG compliant. And then we looked at human rights, women empowerment, and job creation as part of what sustainability encompasses, and of course the reporting itself and the disclosures that had to be made. So those are part of what the FSRCC had approved, which the SEC wholly adopted way back in 2021. And then further to that, we also in 2018 also made the rules on green bond. And I think Nigeria is the first jurisdiction to have a green bond issued in, I believe, in Africa. We also have our social bond rules already approved. So there's a focus, or a deliberate focus, on protection of the environment, on encouraging responsible investing in Nigeria. So we've made these rules. We've had quite a number of green bonds issued, sovereign and corporates issued in Nigeria. We'll have the social bond rules, which is also encouraging responsible investing. Women-focused issuances are also part of what the social bond rules talk about. And now we've got those who are talking about the blue economy, talking about blue bonds, and such other impacts investing avenues that are being created and supported by SEC. We've got some infrastructure funds. We've got people who are building or investing in real estate in Nigeria, and who are actually deliberate in using safe resources for those their real estate. And then part of what we are promoting in the sustainable space, also while talking about sustainable reporting, is that there should be effective corporate governance and sustainable practices that can enhance long-term business sustainability. So we see a handshake between corporate governance practices and sustainability. So by the way, I'm sure that it's not news that corporate governance is about how companies are directed and controlled. And so when Dr. Ndidi said, well, the board should own the sustainability practice. It's not strange because the boards are responsible for directing and controlling companies. And if they do not set the right tone or lead or establish the right culture, and these practices will not be adopted. And so we expect that there should be a proper handshake. So even in corporate governance reporting, we expect that there's going to be that emphasis on the culture of sustainability. And I like to say it is a culture, not just because, like I said, it's not just about standards being made or regulations being made, but we have to imbibe those standards and regulations to become part of us, such that they become the sing song for every entity, and it becomes the culture of the entity. You are focused on protecting the environment, on your social responsibility, on gender issues, and so on. I mean, all the things that these encompass. And so we have also seen that sustainable corporate governance can lead to increase in revenue for organizations, as studies show that strong ESG performance is positively correlated to high equity returns. And that I have already said in a few words by saying there are people who are very focused on ESG investing. We also have seen that there are links between ESG and cash flow by facilitating top line growth, reducing costs, which I talked about. I mean, for instance, adoption of solar rather than paying high electricity bills, and minimizing regulatory and legal intervention. So if you by yourself become very compliant, the regulator spends less time supervising you. That's what we do under the risk-based supervision framework. So we prioritize allocation of our time. So if we see you as a high-risk entity, you're likely to see regulators visit you the more. And that is costly. Costly not because you pay the regulators, costly because you use some of your executive time. You spend your executive time in attending to these regulators who visit you from time to time. Now, I'm not saying our visits are entirely bad, but it's an indication that you are perceived as high risk or above average risk when you see us visit you more frequently than we visit others. So your level of compliance would help you to reduce the cost and the time, the cost of meeting regulatory requirements, because by yourself, if you have set it as a culture and you have begun to comply with it, then you would have less corrective measures to take. And then costs also in terms of penalties, if there are any anyways, can also be reduced when you become a compliant organization. And then when you become a compliant organization, you also optimize investing, and then your capital expenditure would also be curated to suit the sustainability requirements. So cost of capital is also something I need to talk about. Again, if you are ESG compliant, if you're ESG compliant and you report appropriately, the users of your financial statements become a bit more comfortable with you. The cost of funds get lower over time when you are a sustainable entity. So sustainability in terms of compliance with the sustainable reporting requirements, and of course, in terms of meeting the expected targets that you have set for yourself over time. So when you are seen as a responsible company, the cost of your funds become lower. Hopefully profitability is also enhanced because of course less cost of funds anyway. Ability to raise funds is also enhanced over time. I mean, these are things that don't happen overnight, but they are a matter of fact that that's how they are. And then you have better risk management practices within your firm. Now, the measures that you take can positively impact the financial performance. We've talked about that. And now, again, when we talk about financial performance of entities, the bigger picture is that you're contributing more to the performance of the economy. So again, we have to have this macro perspective when we look at things or when we take decisions. You're talking about your entities where you work, whether it's public companies or private, and you're looking at how to generate profits or improve the wealth of shareholders. You're looking at how to make the environment more sustainable. You're looking at compliance with standards. But as long as you continue to improve the wealth of investors, you are also contributing to the economy. And that's the bigger picture. So when we become a sustainable organization and doing things right, and the balance between sustainability and the wealth that we generate would also be contributing to the economy, would also be managing risks more effectively. We have less legal liabilities. Compliance is better, so you would not be found wanting in terms of non-compliance or in terms of expected level of compliance, which could lead to legal obligations or legal liabilities. Fines will be reduced or eradicated. I mean, there are so many advantages that are there to derive when you become a sustainable organization. Companies that are sustainable are also perceived as attractive even to employees. So you find that as investors are quite choosy or getting more savvy around investing in impact entities, in sustainable entities, so also do we have individuals who have also become very conscious of this. And so you will find out that if you're a sustainable organization, you will attract a crop of employees who also want to add to that culture, who want to imbibe the culture of the organization and add to it. So if you put on a scale, there are employees who would prefer to work in organizations that have very positive, sustainable practices, rather than those other ones who are non-compliant. So we have seen that sustainability attracts investors. It also attracts employees and help to improve the bottom line of organizations. I think, Mr. Akinmoladu, if there are specific questions you'd like me to answer, I think this is the right place to stop. Because like I said, I'm not a presenter, I'm only a panelist, I'm only expected to discuss. So if there are other specifics you'd like me to talk about, I'll be ready to take your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you have done justice to most of the questions that will have been asked. Mrs. Shadari is asking, despite the agreement of embraced sustainability in Nigeria, how enforceable, practicable, and adaptable are these standards in reality? Can you look into the question asked by Mrs. Shadari in the box there? Do you have access to it? Hello, ma.
I'll check in a moment. I'm checking.
Okay.
Okay, no, I can't see that.
Okay, let me read.
I've seen it.
You've seen it, okay.
So Mrs. Shadari says, despite the agreements to embrace sustainability in Nigeria, how enforceable, practicable, and adaptable are these standards in reality, e.g. entities that still manufacture products that are not environmentally friendly? Okay, so what I would say is the practices, so you have called them practices, they're not things that happen overnight. Do you know when the Paris Agreement was signed? Do you know how long we've been given? So I think Nigeria committed to zero emission, but in 2026, I believe. So there's a time. What we are trying to say is there has to be a deliberate focus at doing the right things. We cannot say that we're going to change overnight. So for instance, we still rely on petrol, on fossil fuels to some extent, but we're saying that we know that we need clean energy. So we are transiting gradually. We're not saying that it's going to happen overnight. So if you're talking about enforcement, of course we would have enforcement. So when we put out this roadmap, I mean, your reporting helps to even enhance regulation. It will help us to see where we need to improve on. But what's important is take a decision to do the right thing. Don't forget that I said that it's a collective responsibility. It's not just for regulators alone. So the question asked by Mr. Shadari is around, oh, regulators, what are you doing? But I've tried to dissuade you from looking at regulators alone. It is what are we doing collectively? It's not about penalty. I mean, I'm just one regulator. Yes, SEC fines, I'm not saying we don't, but really, what are the penalties expected to do? To help you to change your behavior, to become compliant. We're not out to fine. That's not the primary responsibility of a regulator. It's not a primary responsibility. We're trying to make you see things from a different perspective, to adopt a better practice. And so we expect that having attended this, you go back and look inwards within your companies to see, how do we now adopt these sustainable practices? It's not about us chasing after you. Don't forget that I said, when we chase after you, when you see us regularly, it means we have designated you as high risk. And I don't think that's good for anyone. It's about how do you do things differently? And then how do you now comply with the reporting requirements? It's not about what we can do in terms of enforcing a loan. It's about you starting with it. I think people should just have a culture of trying to comply, have a compliance culture. See what you can do. Go back to the drawing board. Don't forget that it is the duty of the board of the company. So we make regulations. Standards are set by standard setters. The people who implement are the practitioners themselves. So it is your duty to go back to the drawing board, to your boards, and come up with your strategy. Again, strategy is the business of the board. It's not the business of the regulator. We do not write your strategy for you. You develop your strategy by yourselves. So you go back and write your strategy in such a way that it is focused on complying with this. And like I always say, what we give out as regulators, what we make as regulators is baseline. We tell you the minimum standard of compliance. The best of you will do better than what we say. So if we say become compliant in year 2040 and you become compliant in year 2030, then you're better than those who will be compliant. So if you look at the roadmap, and I wish Dr. Ihanye, that's what I like to call him, somebody stop for me, was able to speak more about the roadmap, right? There are early adopters. Why are they adopting early anyway? When we haven't made it mandatory. Sorry?
Because it gives them a competitive advantage. I just wanted to, I jumped in at the end because I just wanted to say that I went into the next meeting, but I kept you in my ear. And I must say that you are an excellent presenter. I refuse to accept that I was as wise and as, insightful as you depicted me to be, because you spoke so eloquently and so powerfully. And I wanted to make sure that the audience understood that the SEC is the member of IOSCO. And IOSCO is a member of the monitoring board of the IFRS Foundation. So actually, you are the regulator. And the fact that you're working so supportively and closely with the Financial Reporting Council of Nigeria, FRCN, and also NGX, which is where the standards were launched, is so fundamental. And so I just wanted to say that I think that the SEC is very privileged to have someone as committed, as eloquent, and as profound as you. I called you Dr. Rufai in the chat, and that's only because I thought to call you Professor Rufai, you would think I wasn't taking it so seriously. I am completely honored and privileged for this paper that I made to have been discussed by someone so eloquent, and not least a member and director of the SEC. I am completely confident that Nigeria is going to lead. And what I said to the chairman of the ISSB, who, by the way, let me just close with this story because I have to jump into a meeting now, but I wanted to come back. When he came to Nigeria and we met with the president pronounced him a Nigerian. So in a meeting where the Minister for Environment was there and the coordinating minister for the economy was there, who happens to be the chair of the African caucus, he pronounced Emmanuel Faber a Nigerian. So we now sometimes joke at the general meetings. I say that the ISSB chairman is actually African. He's not French and he used to be the CEO of Danone, which is one of the countries that invested in smallholder farmers across Africa, putting carbon back into the soil, because agriculture is a very, very important environmental component. So I just want to say that the journey is far yet. And I wanted to thank you again for this incredible panel. I know Dr. Aniara wrote to me, or Dr. Ihanye, as you call him, Mrs. Rufai, or Professor Rufai. He wrote his regrets as he hopped into the plane. He bought a new Wi-Fi system. So I just want to apologize on his behalf because it's very, very not like him. And I said that I would stay on and jump in at the end just to give his apologies and just to say that perhaps what we need to do is plan a repeat where we can deep dive into the standards, talk about the roadmap, and talk about how we will use this momentum to get ahead of the curve, not just from a compliance or regulatory perspective, but really, and you said that very well, Mrs. Rufai, from Dr. Rufai, Professor Rufai, from a business and economic and financial imperative to unlock capital flows, which we need to do together. Thank you again very much for this invitation and also for allowing me to jump in to your closing speech. Let me exit, but this time I will really exit. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Dr.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right.
I think, thank you. There is a nomenclature for Dr. Rufai now. I will encourage you to walk ahead and let Dr. Ndidi's prophecy come true. Maybe we should take this time, you should use this time now to call for questions other than those ones that we have attended to, or we should look at the box.
Yeah.
If we look at the box, it's a question there. How do we apply these standards to environmental sustainability, waste disposal, and recycling of waste in developing countries? There is another one, adroit and deft. Thank you for your insightful presentation. Kindly give us an overview of the requirements of SMEs with respect to reporting in line with the recently launched SMS guidance. Then another one, do we look at that first?
So I'll just say, I mean, with respect to the question by Jacqueline, I would say that I think the FRC would be better at answering that, but I would say that if you get the standards, which I believe you can download them, the S1 and S2, I think they are quite explicit on all of this. So compliant, I think they're just quite explicit. You would have to read the standards, I beg your pardon, before that can be dealt with fully. Because it says, how can we apply the standards to sustainability? So what exactly are you mean? Are you saying practically, what do you do? Recycling, for instance, is a practice that is encouraged. Waste disposal, I mean, even if you look at the SDGs, these are practices that are explained. The SDG talks about waste of food, contaminated water, and things like that. Recycling helps to eliminate waste of certain kinds of materials, helps to keep the environment clean, helps to also, I mean, even in terms of financial resources, I think it's a good use of what we would have condemned as waste, you know. So this is a clean practice, so to speak. And I think all you just need to do is get the standards and begin to reply appropriately. So if you're into recycling, I think you already have a plus from my own viewpoint, and then your report just says the nature of what you do, how you get your resource, how you get your materials that you do. And I think there are a number of companies that are already into this. So it is about complying with the reporting requirements, especially with the roadmap that Dr. Ihai was unable to talk about before he left. Android
Okay,
says,
thank you. There's another question.
Yes. Okay, so on the SME part, I won't be able to answer that. I won't be able to answer that. I apologize.
Okay. There's a question from Musa Megari. How can ESG help the corporate governance practitioners for organizations or business board evaluation and development in Nigeria?
How can ESG help? Okay, so I'm not sure.
How can ESG?
Yes, I can see the question. I'm not sure what he really means, but if it is about integrating ESG compliance to board evaluation, I'm not sure if that's what he's talking about. But if that is it, I think it is not impossible. Again, we've said that. So there are practices that we're all used to. So board evaluation is a professional practice on its own, but we can expand some of these things. And that's why we keep emphasizing integrated reporting. We can expand some of the criteria that we practitioners use for evaluation. So if we all agree as an institute, for instance, or as professionals to say, look, let's continue to encourage sustainability. Don't forget that the sustainability reporting itself is there. But in evaluation, and because we have said it is the duty of the board to entrench this practice, we can include it in the evaluation that we do, especially when a strategy has been developed around it by the company. So I don't think that is such a very hard nut to crack. I think it is something that as an institute we can take a decision on, or as professionals indeed, we can take a decision on and begin to implement. Can I go on, Mr. Akinmoladun?
Please go on. Please go on.
Okay. Thank you. So Tony says he agrees that compliant entities are more sustainable. Sorry?
I said, I don't know if there are people online with questions that we have not taken yet.
Yes, I'm reading them out.
Okay.
Okay, so Tony is asking if I believe that non-compliant companies are more profitable, albeit in the short run. Do I mean, so it's not a strict yes or a strict no, because I haven't carried out any research, but I would agree with you that there's a transition at the moment. So you might still have companies that are non-compliant that are highly profitable, because transition to compliance, to sustainability compliance is a journey. So yes, I agree to some extent that some companies that are not compliant, I mean, the oil companies might still be compliant and might still be profitable, right? But as we all continue to embrace sustainability as a practice, and as we begin to develop people, or as to become more compliant, to become savvy in investing in compliant entities, to develop interest in being employed by compliant entities, you will see that the numbers will begin to change. So like I said, I do not have any research output yet on it, but it is not unlikely at the moment because there's still a journey. But as we begin to embrace it the more, then you will see that the balance will tilt. And then, or the scale will tilt. Thanks very much, and really appreciate the presentations. Thank you, Mr. Oluwole, Odeyemi, Jacqueline. Great presentation. Thank you very much, Jacqueline. Grateful. Do I have more questions? Okay, you're already answering the questions. And okay, so I think we're good.
Okay, thank you very much. I think from the Secretariat, can we now go to the presentation of the plaque? If there are no questions again.
We have gone through all the questions. We have gone through all the questions.
Yes.
We have gone through all the questions, and we are going to have Mr. Olawale Francis, the Honorary Treasurer, please give thanks to Mrs. Rufai and present the plaque to her. Honorary Treasurer, kindly do us this. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, can the IT, put on the screen at least a pictorial view of the plaque that I'm presenting. Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's my pleasure to do this. I mean, when we spoke earlier, and then you thought of some other assignment to give me, you recall what I said, that I would gladly do it as a 3 credit point, course, being an alumni of the committee. And I'm very glad to see Mr. Akinmoladun do this. I'm glad to see Madam Rufai do this. When I was chairing the committee, she knows the name we call her. So maybe we should just keep to Dr. Rufai, and we should not reopen that other one. Anyway, on behalf of your institute, on behalf of the Governing Council, ably led by Madam President, Mrs. Funmilayo Ekundayo, on behalf of your committee, the Governance Practice Committee, even though you have spoken as an orator and as a professional this afternoon, and I must also add my voice to what Dr. Ndidi said. That was very insightful, and that was adorable. Well done. On behalf of your committee and on behalf of your institute, we would like to say a very big thank you to you for that wonderful presentation. I guess Mr. Akim-Oladun was in the spirit when he called it a presentation. I was saying to myself, if you're going to take a presentation, so what will it be like? Madam Rufai, thank you very much.
Thank you
Continue
very
to
much.
be a worthy ambassador of the office. We really appreciate it. So on behalf of the council and Madam President, and then your chairman, we present this to you as a token of appreciation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thank the Institute, my committee, my chairman, and my former chairman for this presentation. Thank you
Don't
very
worry,
much.
the physical equivalence will get to you. It's not just the picture.
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chairman, my work is done.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Mr. Francis Olawale. And thank you once again, Mrs. Rufai. Like Mr. Olawale Francis said, the plaque is not just a picture of the plaque, the physical item will be sent to you. We would also like to, even though in absentia, would like another council member, Mr. Yinka, Dr. Yinka Hassan, FCIS, to make the presentation to Dr. Ndidi Noli Edozien. Dr. Hassan, please kindly do that. We have IT, please can you put the plaque up and then we'll make that presentation quickly. It doesn't appear that Dr. Hassan is on here, is he? I don't think Dr. Hassan is here. Okay, so I would just go ahead and do that. So I would like to, is Dr. Hassan here now? No, he's not. Okay, I'd like to, on behalf of President and Chairman of Council of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria and the Council, make this presentation to Dr. Ndidi Noli Edozien for participating as a guest speaker.
Part of the attendees.
Okay, is it Dr. Hassan?
Dr. Hassan needs to be upgraded to be able to speak.
Oh, really? IT, please upgrade Dr. Hassan. He was on that group earlier. I don't know what happened. Okay, so while he's been upgraded, we still have comments coming in.
Chairman, we can't
I just want to
hear you.
note. You can't hear me. You can't hear me. Am I being heard?
We can hear you, Madam Chair. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I don't know if Dr. Hassan is back here, but I would quickly say that we still have some comments and questions coming in. We'll get answers to those by email to the to those who are asking. I don't think Dr. Hassan is here. So I'm going to continue so that we can round off quickly. I will just say thank you to Dr. Ndidi Noli Edozien for giving us her presentation, which was very much insightful and which elucidated a lot about the standards. Thank you, Ma, for your presentation. So we're going to send the physical item to Mrs. Dr. Ndidi Noli Edozien. Thank you very much. The moderator, we would like to go over to you to take us to
the next thing we do now is group photographs. If we are not, except if you want to make a presentation in absentia to Dr. Iheanyi Ayara, do we do that?
No, I would like to say Dr. Iheanyi Ayara has apologized profusely. We have agreed that we'll have a remark. We're going to have another program quickly, basically to deal with his own presentation. And so we'll do that, and we'll do that short time. Yes.
That's all right.
Ahead to.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
We haven't taken the vote of thanks, if I may remind you.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
We haven't taken the vote of thanks.
Thank you.
I think the group photograph
Thank you,
come
Mr.
up now. Come up now.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Okay.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, well audible.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The next item is vote of thanks, which will be taken by our amiable Vice President, Mrs. Uto Ukpana, FCIS, after which we now take the group photograph. Thank you. Madam VP, how to see on? Madam Vice President.
Yes, I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, distinguished audience. So on behalf of the President and Chairman of the Governing Council, I really want to thank everybody. It's been a very interesting morning into afternoon. We started at 11 and we can see it's 1:20 and we still have a full attendance, and the attendance has really been showcased. It has showcased the importance of this subject today. And so on behalf of the President and Chairman of the Governing Council of our dear institute, the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, Mrs. Funmi Ekundayo, FCIS, I really want to express our immense appreciation for your participation today. I also, on behalf of the Governing Council, want to thank the speakers, the presenters for a very interesting, engaging, insightful, and wonderful session. Today's session focused on sustainable corporate governance practice.
The Vice President is off the call. I'm sure she will join right back in. The Vice President is back on. Ma, kindly unmute and continue.
Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
We can.
Apologies, I accidentally muted myself. Okay, so I won't go over the list again, but just to thank all the members of the council that I had listed who joined this session today. And also, let me proceed to say a big appreciation and thank you to our wonderful speaker, Dr. Ndidi Nolly Edozien. When I approached her, she didn't hesitate to accept our invitation. And she spent significant time today taking us through the background and giving us granular information regarding the thought process that went into IFRS S1 and S2, and also being the voice of Africa on the IFSB board. I can assure you that Ndidi's passion doesn't just end with today, and she has been consistently trotting that path to ensure that sustainability is embedded across Africa, and particularly in Nigeria, and consistently being the voice of Nigeria and Africa on the IFSB board. A big thank you to Dr. Ihenye Ayara of the FRC And Dr. Anyara has been really passionate and at the forefront of embedding sustainability in Nigeria under the auspices of the Financial Reporting Council. And that entity has championed early adoption by Nigerian entities. And Mrs. Hafsat Rufai, ACIS, who is our own, thank you for now making it meaningful for us as practitioners and also giving us the voice of the regulator as well, and sharing from your extensive knowledge and experience. And so today we have heard from policy to practice, and of course, from the perspective of the regulator. I want to really extend our appreciation to our moderator who has connected the dots across all the activities and across all the sessions today. And this thank you would not be complete without once again acknowledging Mrs. Linda Onefeli, FCIS, and the Corporate Governance Committee who puts together this webinar. To our members, I've seen members across all our chapters. I've seen chapter president, and I had mentioned their name, unfortunately, during the time I was muted. So I would just want to thank you and encourage you to continue to benefit and join and benefit from all the sessions that the Institute is organizing. To non-members, I encourage you to join the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria. Our programs are aimed at ensuring that you are robustly equipped for your role, and that in whatever that you do, you bring forth that eloquent, that informative aspect of knowledge and learning. You can find information regarding membership on our website. You can also contact the Registrar CU, or you can contact any member of the National Secretariat. A big thank you to our media partners. I invite participants to join us on all our programs. You can find information across our social media footprint and of course, including our website. Once again, I want to thank you for your time today on this rainy day, rainy Thursday. If you're in Lagos, I don't know whether it's raining across the footprint of where our members join from. And I encourage you to continue to drive the message of sustainability across our entities, across sectors. Once again, thank you for your time and attention. God bless our institute and God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President. Thank you, ma'am, for that. I want to please let it be on record. Mr. Dr. Hassan, I called severally. He apparently was online, but was unable to speak. I think he needed to be upgraded, like Professor Rufai said. So sorry about that. Moderator, please let's move on to the end of.
Yes, I think we now have to take the group photograph.
Okay.
We turn on our cameras for the group photograph.
Camera to me one number. Okay.
Okay. With the permission of Madam President, we want to declare this event closed with a national anthem.
Thank you. Good national anthem, Lenko.